It was early morning in Phoenix, Arizona, when I realized I was completely alone. The house was silent, every room empty, every chair untouched, and the people I had trusted most were gone without a note. I stood in the middle of my living room with my hands shaking, trying to understand how a family I built from the ground up could vanish like strangers. I didn't know that in just a few days, the truth would appear on the TV screen and change everything. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay until the end. This story turns fast. I woke up that morning like any other day. The house was quiet, the way it usually is before everyone starts moving around. I sat up slowly, took a breath, and listened for the familiar sounds. A cupboard opening, footsteps in the hallway, someone calling out a quick good morning. But there was nothing, only silence. A kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. I got up and walked through the hallway, expecting to see at least one light on, a jacket on the chair, a bag by the door. But every room I walked into looked like it had been cleared out. Beds made too neatly, closets half open but empty. The kitchen counter spotless, not a single cup in the sink. Even the usual pile of mail was gone. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, like the air had changed overnight. At first, I told myself maybe they went out early. Maybe there was some errand, some plan I forgot about. But as I kept walking, I realized this wasn't a simple outing. The living room looked staged, like someone preparing a house for a photograph. Blank, soulless. The shoes that always sat by the door, gone. The coats on the hanger, gone. The keys that usually jingled in a bowl, gone. I reached for my phone, hands already shaking, and opened the family group chat. The last message was from 2 days ago, something simple and unimportant. But there was nothing from last night, nothing from early morning, no missed calls, no updates, no explanation. That's when the cold feeling started to climb up my spine. I walked to my daughter's room, something inside me hoping she'd still be there. But the bed was stripped, drawers pulled out. Not violently, not rushed, but carefully emptied. As if she had packed her things one by one, making sure she didn't leave a trace of her behind. My son-in-law's room was the same, completely bare except for an old charger on the floor. Even my granddaughter's toys were gone, leaving only faint marks on the carpet where they once sat. It was like the house had been vacuumed of their existence. My throat tightened. I tried calling my daughter. It rang only once before switching to voicemail. I tried again, then again. Nothing. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. I tried calling my son-in-law, then my granddaughter's little number she used for school apps and games. Every call went straight to voicemail. It felt unreal, like I was trapped in a bad dream, and any second I'd wake up. My mind kept searching for reasons. Maybe an emergency, maybe they were scared of something, maybe someone was ill. But if that were true, why take everything? Why leave no note? Why leave me with nothing but quiet rooms and questions? I walked back to the kitchen and sat down at the table, the same table where we once shared meals, arguments, laughter. Now it felt foreign. I placed my palm on the wood and felt how cold it had become. I looked around at the empty chairs, remembering where each person used to sit. I kept thinking, maybe they forgot to tell me, maybe they'll call back in a minute. But minutes kept passing, each one heavier than the last. The longer I waited, the more I felt the truth settle inside me like a stone. They left, not by accident, not by mistake. They planned it, they packed, they moved, and they didn't think I deserved to know. My heartbeat grew faster. I stood up and went to the back door, hoping maybe I'd see a car pulling up, someone waving apologetically, someone explaining everything. But the driveway was empty. The yard was still. Even the neighbor's house seemed quiet, as if the world had paused to watch my heart break. I walked back inside, each step echoing too loudly. That echo made everything worse. It reminded me of how full this house once was, how loud my family used to be. And now, suddenly, I was the only sound left. I sat down again and whispered to myself, "Why?" But there was no answer, only the weight of confusion and betrayal pressing down on me. I felt small, unwanted, like all the years I cared for them, All the sacrifices I made, all the nights I stayed awake thinking about their futures, none of it meant anything to them. I could feel tears start to form, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not before I understood what had happened. Not before I gathered the strength to face the truth. As I looked around that empty house, I realized something painful. The people I trusted most had disappeared without a trace, leaving me to wake up alone in a place that suddenly didn't feel like home anymore. It was a betrayal so deep I didn't know how to breathe for a moment, and I didn't know then, not yet, that the truth would hit me even harder once I turned on the television. I sat on the edge of my bed that morning, staring at the empty hallway like it was a bad dream that refused to fade. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, it comes from absence. Their shoes were gone, their jackets, their laughter, even the small messes they usually left behind had vanished. It felt like someone had swept my entire life out of the door while I slept. For a long time, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling my heart race in a way it hadn't in years. I kept telling myself maybe they'd run an errand, maybe they'd be back for breakfast, maybe I was imagining things. But the truth settled in my stomach like a stone. They had left me, not by accident, not in confusion. They had made a decision to go, without a word, without a message, without a shred of shame. I stood and walked through each room slowly, touching the chairs, the counters, the old picture frames. Everything felt colder. The sofa where we watched movies last week, now just a piece of furniture. The dining table where I cooked meals for them for years. Empty, like it had never known family at all. In the kitchen sink, the bowl I used last night was still there, soaked the way I left it. But everything else had been cleared out. They had even taken the new groceries I bought for the week. I opened the fridge and stared at the shelves, shocked by how bare they looked. How do you take food from someone you're abandoning? How do you leave behind the person who fed you? I walked back to the living room and sat down, holding the armrest because my hands were shaking too much to keep still. My breathing got heavy, not from age, from betrayal. I couldn't understand what I had done. I replayed the last conversation I had with them. We had dinner together. We laughed. They said goodnight like everything was normal. There was no argument, no warnings, no clues. And yet, there I was, waking up to nothing but silent walls. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. I tried calling my son. The call didn't even ring. Blocked. My daughter-in-law, same thing. Blocked. One by one, I tried every number connected to them. Each time, the call failed. That was when the truth hit me the hardest. This wasn't a mistake. They didn't forget me. They didn't go out for a moment. They cut me off completely, like I was someone they needed to erase. I felt my chest tighten, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. I pressed my hand against my heart, whispering, "Why? What did I do?" But the room gave me no answers. The walls didn't care. The chairs didn't know. There was no one to explain why the people I gave everything to had walked away from me without even giving me a chance to speak, to ask, to understand. I sat there until the sun moved across the floor, making a long shadow from the window. Time passed, but the pain didn't move. I felt small, like the world had shrunk around me. I tried to stand, but had to sit again because my legs felt weak. I hadn't felt that helpless since the day I buried my husband. And now here I was, left alone by the very people he and I raised with our own hands. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I had never been perfect, but I had been loyal. I had helped them when money was short. I had cooked for them when they were tired. I had watched their children, cleaned their messes, and opened my home every time they needed anything. I had stayed up nights when they were sick, prayed for them when they struggled, and celebrated every win they had as if it were my own. And still, they walked away like I never mattered. My eyes stung. I tried to stop the tears, but they came anyway, slow at first, then steady, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet streams from a heart that couldn't understand how love could end so coldly. I wiped my face and told myself, maybe they'll come back. Maybe this is some mistake. but deep down, I knew better. People who love you don't disappear. People who respect you don't block you. People who value you don't erase you overnight. I looked around the empty house again and whispered to myself, I trusted them with everything, and this is what I get. The pain sat heavy in my chest, but something else began to grow too. A slow, steady anger that came from truth, not emotion. The anger didn't make me shake. It made me think. It made me see. It made me understand that if they could walk away from me without a word, then maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the helpless one in this story. I sat there in that empty house, staring at the quiet walls, and all I could think about was everything I had given to the very people who left me without a word. It is strange how memory works. When people betray you, your mind does not immediately jump to anger. It goes backwards. It pulls you into all the years you stood by them, all the times you sacrificed your own needs so they could have what you never had. That morning, as I looked around the living room that used to be full of life, my mind walked through my past like it was a long hallway with open doors. I remembered working double shifts when they were young. I would come home tired, hands swollen, back aching, but I still cooked for them, ironed their clothes for school, checked homework, and packed lunches before I even sat down for myself. Their father left early in their lives, and I was the mother and the father in that house. I was the one who attended every school play, every parent-teacher meeting, every scraped knee, and every fevered night. I never once said, I'm too tired. I never once said, handle it yourself. I thought that was what love meant, giving without keeping count. When they turned older, I helped them with college forms, job applications, even rent for their first apartments. I remember lending money I didn't have, skipping medicines I needed, telling myself it was temporary. But you know how it goes. Help once, help twice, and suddenly it becomes expected. I watched them grow comfortable with my sacrifices, as if they were part of their birthright. They never questioned where I got the money. They never asked if I needed anything in return. They just took it, smiled, and moved on with their own lives. I also remembered the holidays when I stayed up late preparing food, cleaning, decorating, just to make sure they felt welcomed and loved. They came, they ate, they laughed, and they left dishes in the sink without a thank you. I thought it was normal. I told myself, at least they are here. I didn't realize that I had trained them to believe my kindness was free and endless. There were years I went without buying new clothes just so I could help one of them with a down payment. Years I saved every small amount, thinking I was building a future for us, a future where they would take care of me when I grew older. I believed loyalty was automatic when you raise someone. I believed love naturally comes back around. It took me 60+ years to discover that love without boundaries becomes a trap you build around yourself. I thought about the time one of them called me at midnight, crying about debt, and I stayed awake until morning, finding a way to help. Or the time I pawned my wedding ring, one of the last memories I had of my late husband, just so they could pay rent. I remembered how proud I felt when I mailed them the money, thinking I was protecting them from shame. I remembered how they didn't even ask if that was my last savings. Thinking back, the signs of selfishness were always there. Small moments that felt off, cold answers to warm questions, birthdays skipped, excuses piled up, visits that got shorter each year. But I never allowed myself to see those things clearly. A mother forgives faster than she understands. A mother sees what she wants to see. A mother keeps believing love will return one day. All those memories came back at once. Every meal I cooked, every bill I paid, every worry I carried for them. And there I was, sitting in an empty house, forgotten like an old coat left on a hook. I felt the weight of all those years pressed down on my chest. This wasn't just abandonment. It was a lifetime of loyalty paid back with silence. I looked around that quiet room and realized something painfully true. I had devoted my life to people who only remembered me when they needed something. I had loved them deeply, but they loved me conveniently. And now that my time of usefulness had passed for them, they walked away without a goodbye. But as I sat there, I also felt a new thought rise inside me. If they could leave me after all I had done, then I had spent my life giving to the wrong people. And for the first time, instead of crying, I took a long breath and told myself, this will not be the final chapter of my story. For months before they left me alone, the signs had been sitting right in front of my face, but I kept telling myself everything was fine. At my age, you learn to overlook small hurts because you don't want to make trouble in your own family. I kept thinking, they're busy, they're stressed, they don't mean it. But now, looking back, every small sign was a piece of the truth they were slowly walking toward. It didn't happen in one day. It was building like a slow leak in a roof. You don't see it until the ceiling finally collapses on your head. It started with the phone calls. They used to call me every other evening. Simple things, asking if I had eaten, if my blood pressure medicine was working, if I needed groceries. Then, the pattern changed. Calls went from every evening to once a week, then once every 2 weeks, and then not at all. I would ring them, and the phone would ring and ring before going to voicemail. When they finally called back, they spoke fast, like they couldn't wait to end the call. "Mom, I'm busy. Mom, later. Mom, I have something to do." It felt like every later pushed me further out of their life. Then they stopped visiting. Before, they'd drop by on Sundays for lunch. My house always smelled like chicken stew and cornbread on those days. Suddenly, Sundays became errand days for them. They said they were tired from work or had plans. Plans that never included me. Once, I asked if they wanted to come over for dinner. My daughter said, "Maybe next time, Mom," but the next time never came. I stopped asking after the fourth maybe. There were signs in their voices, too. When I talked, they didn't listen. When I tried sharing stories or memories, I'd hear them sigh softly, like I was wasting their time. The warmth that used to sit in their tone was gone, replaced by something sharp, something impatient. I told myself they were stressed. I tried not to take it personally, but a mother always feels when her children's voices go cold. Their behavior around the house changed too. They used to walk in, hug me, look around, fix small things, open the fridge, laugh at old pictures. Slowly, they stopped hugging. They stood near the doorway, kept their bags on their shoulders, as if they didn't plan to stay even 5 minutes. They didn't sit, didn't talk, didn't breathe in the home they once grew up in. They acted like visitors instead of my own blood. Once, my son stood the whole time, checking his watch, and left after 3 minutes. 3 minutes. A stranger would have stayed longer. Money became another quiet sign. Not big amounts, small things. They stopped paying me back for groceries I bought for their kids. They stopped offering help when my electricity bill jumped during winter. They forgot my birthday that year. Not late, forgot completely. No call, no card, nothing. I sat by my window that night with a small slice of leftover cake I bought for myself, singing happy birthday alone. I knew something was changing in them, but I kept pretending it wasn't. There were other tiny things too, things only a mother notices. When I gave my granddaughter a sweater I knitted, my daughter-in-law said, "She has enough clothes." When I offered to babysit, she said, "We'll manage." When I invited them for Thanksgiving, they said, "We're doing our own thing this year." Their own thing, without me. The worst sign came one afternoon. My son came over, but not to see me. He came to pick up some documents from the old cabinet. I handed him a cup of tea, like always. He didn't take it. He didn't even look at it. He just said, "Mom, don't get too attached. We have our own life now." Those words were the quietest and the loudest thing he'd ever said. Don't get too attached. As if a mother can detach from her children, like taking off a coat. I remember sitting on the sofa after he left, staring at the dent his car's tires left in the dirt outside. That dent felt like the mark of distance they were creating between us. But still, even then, I told myself, they're just going through something. They'll come back. But they didn't. And when the day came, when I woke up and found the house empty, their phones off, their cupboards cleared out, I realized those small signs were never small. They were warnings, they were cracks in the foundation, and I was the fool who kept painting over them, believing the house would stand forever. When the house finally went quiet and the shock faded enough for me to breathe again, I sat down at the kitchen table and looked around the room like it was a place I had never seen before. The chair across from me was empty. The coffee pot was still warm. The shoes that my daughter usually kicked off near the door were gone. Every corner of that house felt like a memory that had been wiped clean. I sat there with my hands folded, staring at the wall, letting the truth settle in. They weren't coming back. Not that day. Not the next. Maybe not ever. The people I trusted, the people I thought would be with me until my final days, had chosen to walk away without saying anything. It hurt, and it hurt in a way I cannot fully explain. It wasn't just loneliness. It was something deeper, a kind of broken feeling that sits in your chest like a heavy stone. It was the realization that I had been carrying the weight of the family alone for years. I kept the house running. I kept the bills paid. I kept the peace during every argument. I remembered birthdays, appointments, school events, and little details about everyone's life. I made sure the holidays were warm, the meals were ready, and the lights were always on. But when I needed them, when it was my turn to lean on someone, they vanished like smoke. As I sat there with the ticking clock filling the silence, I thought about all the years I pushed down my own tiredness just to keep going for them. I remembered the nights I stayed up, waiting for someone to come home safe. I remembered the days I skipped meals so the kids could eat first. I remembered selling my jewelry when money was tight. I remembered the countless times they said, "We'll help later," but later never came. And now this, empty rooms and unanswered calls. It felt like the final proof that I meant very little to people I had built my life around. For a moment, I considered doing what I always did, waiting, making excuses for them, telling myself they must have had a reason. But this time, something inside me pushed back. A small voice I had ignored for years finally spoke up. It said that if people choose to leave, you don't chase them. You don't beg for respect. You don't stand at the door hoping things will go back to normal. You face the truth, even if it breaks your heart. I realized that morning that I had two paths in front of me. One was the same path I had walked my whole life, being the quiet, forgiving one, letting people treat me however they wanted, hoping that someday they'd understand my worth. The other path was unfamiliar. It was the path where I stood up for myself, even if I had to do it alone. A path where I stopped letting people take advantage of my kindness. A path where I decided that my dignity mattered more than anyone's comfort. I took a deep breath and looked around my kitchen again. Nothing had changed physically, but everything inside me had shifted. I felt a new kind of determination rising. It wasn't loud or angry. It was steady, calm, and sharp. I told myself that being abandoned didn't make me weak. It didn't mean I had failed. It only meant it was time to stop living for people who didn't live for me. I stood up from the table slowly, steadying myself with one hand. My legs were stiff, but my resolve was strong. I walked from room to room, looking at every empty space, and instead of crying again, I made a decision. I would rebuild myself. I didn't know how yet, and I didn't know where to begin, but I knew one thing. I would not sit in that quiet house waiting for people who had already shown me they didn't care. That was the moment the fear started to fade, and something stronger took its place. I wasn't going to stay helpless, abandoned, and forgotten. I was going to stand up, think clearly, and prepare for whatever came next. If they didn't value me, then I would value myself. If they wanted to leave me behind, then I would start living in a way that didn't need them. I wiped my face with my sleeve, straightened my posture, and took a long breath. For the first time in years, I felt a small spark of control returning. I didn't know yet that the television would show me the truth I needed. I didn't know yet that everything they hid would fall apart on its own. But in that quiet moment, in that empty house, I made the choice that would change everything. I would no longer be the woman they could walk away from. I would be the woman who stood up and fought back. I didn't expect anything from that morning. I was just trying to fill the silence. The house felt too big, too empty, too cold after they all disappeared without a word. I turned on the TV only because I couldn't stand the sound of my own thoughts anymore. The news anchor's voice was loud, sharp, and fast, the kind that makes you stop even if you don't want to. At first, I didn't pay attention. It was just another report about fraud and stolen money and people behaving worse than strangers. But then I heard the name, my own family's name, clear, direct, said on national television as if it belonged to criminals. My hand froze on the remote. The room felt smaller. My ears rang. For a moment, I didn't even breathe. The reporter said it again, louder this time, because they were just about to reveal the people involved. I knew that voice. I knew every tone, every rhythm. It was the name of the people who left me behind without a word. The screen changed. Photos appeared, documents, numbers, dates, places, and then faces, their faces. My blood ran cold. I held the edge of the sofa, not because I was scared, but because the truth was so heavy it pushed me backward. The people I had raised, fed, clothed, defended, worked for, cried for, the same people who vanished without warning, were standing in a TV studio, smiling as if they were proud of themselves. They weren't missing. They weren't hurt. They weren't kidnapped. They didn't need help. They had left me behind because they were starting a new life, built on lies, stolen money, and a scandal I didn't even know existed. The report explained everything. They had been under investigation for months. They were involved in a scheme that stole money from elderly clients, and I realized some of those clients were my own friends, people I'd known from church, from the grocery store, from the senior center. And while I sat in my quiet house wondering if I had done something wrong, they were traveling, spending, laughing, posing for pictures, living as if loyalty was nothing but a word. They were not victims. They were running. And I was the only one who didn't know. I leaned back and let the truth sink in, piece by piece. All the small signs that I ignored suddenly made sense. The hidden phone calls, the late-night whispers, the days when they avoided me, the moments they seemed nervous when I asked simple questions. I didn't want to believe any of it back then, but now the evidence was on every TV across the country. They didn't just leave me, they abandoned me so I wouldn't ask questions, so I wouldn't be a witness, so I wouldn't accidentally expose them. The anchor continued talking, but I stopped listening to the details. The shock had turned into something else, something firmer, something colder, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was weak, they thought I was old, they thought I was blind. But the truth wasn't just a punch, it was a door opening. A door I didn't even know I was allowed to walk through. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hurt anymore. I wasn't lonely anymore. I was aware. And awareness changes everything. I realized I still had power. Not loud power, not violent power, but the kind of power that sits quietly until the right moment. I had documents in my house. I had proof of things they forgot I kept. Old files, old agreements, old signatures. They were so busy building their new life that they forgot the old life still had strings attached, and those strings were tied to me. As the news showed their smiling faces, pretending they didn't have a past, I whispered to myself, "You forgot who raised you. You forgot who watched every step. You forgot I paid attention even when you thought I didn't." I turned off the TV. The silence didn't bother me anymore. In fact, it felt steady, like the kind of silence that comes right before action. I sat there for a long time, hands folded in my lap, not crying, not shaking, not breaking. I felt something rebuild inside me, something strong, something ready. The truth on that screen didn't just change my understanding, it changed my role in the story. They left me behind to keep me quiet. Now they had just handed me the one thing they never wanted me to have: information. And information is power. I didn't go rushing toward them with anger. I didn't scream or cry or let emotion push me into mistakes. I waited. I waited until every piece of paper was lined up, every document copied, every message screenshot saved, every bank alert forwarded to my lawyer, and every detail from the television report written down in a neat folder. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady, not healed, not whole, but steady, like I finally had my feet under me again. When you've been abandoned, something shifts in you. You go from begging for answers to demanding truth. And that was exactly what I planned to do. The next morning, I drove to the house where they were staying, my own family, the people who walked out on me without even leaving a note. The same people who I thought would hold my hand in old age, but instead chose silence. I parked my car in front of their driveway and watched the curtains move. They weren't expecting me. They sure weren't expecting me with evidence in my hands. I stepped out slowly, clutching the folder under my arm. My legs felt heavy, but my heart felt strong. I knocked on the door, not loud, just firm. The door opened, and the first thing I saw was shock, real shock. No guilt, no shame, just pure fear wrapped in surprise. My son froze like his soul had been caught at a red light. My daughter-in-law's smile disappeared so fast she couldn't even fake it. I held up the folder and said nothing. I didn't need to. I walked right past them into the living room, the same living room I used to clean, decorate, and fill with food during holidays. Now it felt cold, empty, like I had never mattered. They followed behind me, voices shaky, asking why I was there. I sat down calmly, placed the folder on the table, and opened it page by page. Their faces changed with each paper. First confusion, then discomfort, then panic. They tried to talk, but I lifted my hand and they stopped. I had listened to their silence long enough. Now they were going to listen to mine. I pulled out the headline from the television news report, the one they didn't know I'd seen. Their names were on it, their actions exposed publicly. The world finally saw what I had lived through in private. They weren't just messy or irresponsible. They were reckless, dangerous, and the report made that very clear. You can hide a lot from a parent, but you cannot hide from the truth when it reaches a television screen. My daughter-in-law's hand shook. She tried to defend herself, but her words fell apart before they even reached me. My son stared at the floor, cheeks red, hands twisting like a child caught stealing. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I spoke in a calm voice, the kind of calm that scares people more than rage. I told them I knew about the lies, the money moved behind my back, the plans they were making with my assets, and the way they left me alone like I didn't exist. And then I told them I knew why they disappeared. The truth finally laid out in front of us. They begged then. Not loudly, not dramatically, quiet begging, the kind that happens when pride cracks open. But I didn't come for their apologies. I came for their accountability. I slid the final set of documents toward them, my legal papers, papers that protected me, papers that proved I wasn't helpless like they hoped, papers that made it clear that whatever they tried to take from me, they wouldn't get away with it. I told them simply, "You walked away from me. Now you are responsible for everything you tried to hide." Their eyes widened, their words stumbled, and suddenly the air shifted. For the first time in my life, they looked at me, not as the woman they could use, not as the mother or grandmother they assumed would forgive anything, but as someone they underestimated. And finally, they understood the weight of what they had done. I stood up, took my folder, and headed to the door. As I walked out, I said one last thing, not to hurt them, but to make sure they remembered. You wanted me gone. Now you will learn what life looks like without the person who stood between you and consequences. Their silence followed me out the door. And for once, that silence didn't break me. It freed me. Justice does not always come fast. Sometimes it comes slowly, like a door that finally unlocks after years of being jammed. When the truth about my family appeared on the news, everything changed. I was not the confused, abandoned old woman sitting alone in an empty house anymore. I became the woman everyone wanted answers from. My lawyer, the reporters, even neighbors who once pretended not to notice when my family ignored me. The moment the truth came out, I felt something inside me straighten. I finally felt like someone who mattered again. The report exposed every lie they had built behind my back, the money they quietly moved out of my account, the property papers they forged, the small debts they left under my name. Even the way they talked about me in public, calling me a burden, too slow, too costly. It was all right there on the screen. They had been doing more than abandoning me. They had been preparing to erase me from their lives slowly, one quiet signature at a time, until nothing would be left of the home I built or the savings I worked for. That report didn't just reveal their plans, it destroyed them. My lawyer called me right after the broadcast. He said, "Now we act." And we did. Every document we gathered, every message they left unanswered, every statement from the bank, all of it was lined up neatly. Watching the truth come together like that felt like watching a broken picture finally match again. My lawyer filed everything: fraud, neglect, financial abuse. He told me I had a stronger case than most people ever get. I sat in his office, hands folded in my lap, and I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel lost. I felt steady for the first time since the day they walked out on me. Within days, the consequences began. Their accounts were flagged. The property they tried to move suddenly froze. The same relatives who once treated me like a forgotten chore were suddenly calling my phone nonstop, pretending they cared. I didn't answer any of them. For years, they expected me to solve their problems, fill their fridges, babysit their children, cover their bills, and stay quiet whenever they were too busy for me. Now they wanted mercy. But mercy is something you give to people who made a mistake, not people who made a plan. The police contacted me next. They asked for a statement. I told them everything in clear words. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't try to sound dramatic. I just told the truth. The simple truth of being abandoned by the people I raised, cared for, fed, clothed, and protected. The truth that I woke up one morning and realized my family didn't just forget me, they left me intentionally. I told the officer I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted my dignity back. He nodded, and for the first time in months, someone looked at me with respect. The community's reaction came next. Neighbors who once kept their distance now sent food, offered rides, left notes at my door. They said they were sorry they didn't notice sooner. Some said they always sensed something was wrong, but didn't want to interfere. I accepted their kindness, but I didn't rely on it. I had spent too long waiting for other people to treat me right. I was done waiting. I wanted control over my life again, and the legal process was giving it to me piece by piece. My family tried to apologize publicly, mostly to save their own reputation. One of them even tried sending a statement to the news, saying they loved me and never meant to hurt me. The world didn't believe them. I didn't believe them. People can lie, but behavior doesn't. Leaving someone alone without a word is not love. Moving money behind their back is not love. Trying to erase their home from under them is not love. Their sudden tears meant nothing. Justice meant everything. When the legal case concluded, I regained full control of my assets, my house, and my name. Their access to anything that belonged to me was permanently removed. They were told not to contact me unless it was through the lawyer. I walked out of that courthouse with my head held high, not because I had won something big, but because I had reclaimed something simple, my place in the world. For the first time in years, I looked around my house and felt peace instead of fear. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It healed. I cooked myself dinner, sat in my favorite chair, and realized I wasn't the abandoned woman they left behind. I was the woman who stood up, used her voice, and fought for her life back. Tell me, when the people you trust choose to walk away, do you follow them in heartbreak, or stand your ground and let justice come back to you? When everything finally calmed down and the dust settled, I sat alone in my living room and looked around the house that had once been filled with voices, footsteps, and arguments. The same people who had left me without a word were now scattering like ants because the truth had come out in front of everyone. I expected myself to feel angry or bitter, but what I felt instead was something simpler: relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anyone on my back. I wasn't holding together a house full of ungrateful people. I wasn't giving love to people who offered nothing but silence in return. I had myself, and that turned out to be enough. I kept replaying that morning when I woke up alone. I remembered the empty chairs, the still air, the strange quiet. It had felt like my whole world was collapsing. But now, looking back, I understood that the world wasn't collapsing. It was clearing. It was removing what didn't belong anymore. I had spent years thinking my worth came from what I gave to others. I cooked, cleaned, paid bills, reminded them of birthdays, comforted them when life got hard. I was the one they leaned on. I was the one who made everything steady. But when they walked out and left me behind, they taught me something important. People will take advantage of you as long as you let them. The news report that revealed their secret still played in my memory, like a movie I didn't ask to watch. Seeing their faces on the screen, hearing the reporter read out details they thought I would never learn. That moment changed everything. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It wasn't about being alone. It was proof that people who hide lies eventually trip over them. They showed the world who they really were. I didn't have to expose them. They exposed themselves. And that was the moment I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to shout or scream or demand apologies. I just needed to step out of their lives so the consequences could find them. After the story aired, some relatives called me. People who ignored me for years suddenly wanted to check on me. Some neighbors brought food. Others pretended they always cared. I thanked them politely, but inside I felt stronger than ever. I didn't want pity. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want people acting like I was some helpless old woman who needed to be rescued. I had rescued myself. I had walked through the betrayal, the shock, the loneliness. And I came out on the other side on my own 2 feet. My family eventually tried to come back around. They sent messages, made calls, left long voicemails filled with excuses and shaky voices. They said they didn't mean to leave and that it was just a misunderstanding. But I remembered how easily they left me. Not a note, not a call, not a second thought. I remembered the quiet morning when I realized that my loyalty had been one-sided. So I didn't answer their calls. I didn't open the door when they visited. I didn't fall for tears that came only after the world saw their true colors. My silence became my boundary. Over the next few weeks, I built a new routine. I woke up early, made my coffee the way I liked it, took long walks, read books I never had time for when I was busy solving everyone else's problems. I cleaned the house, not because someone was coming over, but because it made me feel good. I bought new curtains, new plates, new towels, small things, but they made the house feel like mine again. Not ours, mine. I learned something important. When people walk out of your life, don't chase them. Leave the door closed behind them. Peace waits on the other side. I'm telling this story not to make anyone feel sorry for me, but to remind anyone watching that betrayal doesn't mean your life is over. It means your life is changing. The people you love the most can hurt you the deepest, but that doesn't mean you have to stay wounded. You can rise. You can rebuild. You can choose yourself. I did, and I'm proud of it. So here is my message to you, especially if you're a woman my age who spent her whole life giving, and giving. Stop handing out pieces of yourself to people who don't care if you disappear. Stand up for yourself. Set boundaries. And when the people who took you for granted finally face the truth, don't rush back to comfort them. Let them sit with the consequences. I survived the betrayal of the people I trusted most, but more importantly, I found myself again. Tell me, if you learned the truth on a screen for the whole world to see, would you fall apart or stand up and start living for yourself?